let me just kick it off with a quick question about France, since you're a lot closer to France than we are, and your take on what is actually behind this, 5 days of protest here?
I mean, ultimately, Megyn, the death of this 17-year-old guy, if you are told by a police officer, I'm sure even in America as well as Britain, we agree on this, that if you are told by an armed officer of the law not to drive off in your vehicle, then you should not drive off in your vehicle. And what's happened now, I think the death of this young guy is being used as an excuse to loot, to destroy, to burn, and to steal. And there can be no justification for that much of a breach, a breakdown of the rule of law. Because ultimately, Megyn, if you live in France, if you want to live in France, you ought to accept the French way of life. It's the same if you want to live in Britain. And we have a southern border problem in the same way that the United States of America does. And it all comes down to this fundamental point for me. It's a fundamental failure of multiculturalism across the West. Because, Megyn, I don't know if it struck you, but it's an intriguing paradox that France is labelled as some kind of racist hellhole, and that's why there is this level of rioting on the streets today. But if France really is this racist hellhole that some claim it to be, why do we witness a flood of individuals from North Africa and elsewhere flocking to France's shores, to Europe and to Britain and elsewhere? Racial inequality is being used, as I say, as a convenient excuse to engage in criminal behavior, wanton acts such as stealing, burning, and destroying property. Because, Megyn, I'm no expert, but ransacking Louis Vuitton ain't going to solve the ghettoization of certain French communities. So this is an excuse. We saw it in America, and the BML riots that went on then, the looting, the stealing, the wanton acts of criminality. It's been used as an excuse in France. The rule of law has broken down. But I'm afraid it leads to the same conclusion, which is that in France, the flood of mass migration into Europe and the so-called multiculturalism and diversity that we're told is all so precious and the strength of our nations, it ain't working, folks. That's the be-all and end-all.
And that's where most of the riots have taken place. We showed video a little while ago of protesters out by the Champs-Élysées, but that's the exception. For the most part, this has been happening in those neighborhoods where those immigrants live. And, these are not great neighborhoods. I mean, you've seen these if you come into Paris from Charles de Gaulle Airport, you'll see it's crazy the way a lot of these immigrants are living. But France is largely socialist in its policies. It's like, how much more help can there be? The safety net in France is pretty significant. They want more. They want more things from the French people and the French government, but they're not assimilating into the culture there. That's not to say anything about this particular 17-year-old, but the divisions are growing. This is a failed experiment of taking just masses from other countries who have really no interest in living comfortably as French citizens. They want their own culture to start to dominate, and the hostilities are brewing, which is behind at least some of what we're seeing.
Absolutely, Megyn. I mean, I've just watched a video with a group of fighting age young men at sea with Richard Gere. Now, Gere was arguing that we must support immigration to Europe, mass migration to Europe. It's useful idiots, I'm afraid, and Hollywood lovies like Richard Gere that are actually helping people smugglers and causing problems in Britain and in France and the rest of Europe. We here in Britain, for example, like in America, that southern border migration is, it's illegal, but ultimately I don't ever think we should be accepting people. And I think many people in France feel the same way. It's why you're seeing a rise in support for the likes of Marine Le Pen. Because if you accept someone arriving illegally and say, look, we'll give you everything you ask for, we'll give you your bed, board and benefits, it shows wanton disregard for the laws of our land and, frankly, the ability to disregard law and order. So I say no thanks, and I make no apologies for that, Megyn. The British media, the politicians across the left, most politicians in Britain, if you say things like this, you are dismissed as being some kind of far-right, swivel-eyed bigot. But actually, Britain has a severe housing crisis. Our healthcare system is allowing many unnecessary deaths because we have a nutty socialist system in Britain and it cannot cope with the sheer number and volume post-lockdown. And we don't have enough teachers or school places. You know, Britain and France cannot be the end destinations for every single economic migrant. And that's what they are, Megyn, that want to come here. And nor do I think actually does the West have or Europe have a responsibility to the millions upon millions of people that would quite like to come to these economies over their host nations, their home nations. So we're seeing these tensions build up. And I actually predict, and this is an unhappy prediction actually, but I predict that similar things are going to happen here in the United Kingdom as well, because we already see disputes on the streets of London over issues like the Iranian regime. We see in places like Leicester, we see disputes between Muslims and the Leicester Sikh community, for example, who are basically importing disputes from India, disputes from Iran, and bringing them into British life. And we're saying, hang on a minute. If you come here, you accept that you're a British citizen. We don't want that kind of drama being imported into this country. We've got enough
There's a
problems.
reason your culture has evolved to where it has, thanks to generations of Brits who have chosen to live a certain way. Why would you just say, okay, we'll do it your way from your country where we never chose to live? None of our ancestors chose to live. We've been living under totally different standards and with totally different cultural values. You assimilate to us or go back home.
Exactly. Beautifully put. I mean, were I to turn up in the United States of America tomorrow, Megyn, and say, look, I'm applying for American citizenship. It's a beacon of hope and liberty to the world. But actually, folks, I'm going to demand on July the 4th that you guys accept the supreme governorship of His Majesty King Charles III. I imagine you'd give me very short shrift, Megyn, and tell me I can sling my hook. And that's what we ought to be doing when it comes to
We already have a guy over here who's trying to do
issues.
that. His name is Prince Harry. In a somewhat startling description, the UN food chief warned the world with the words, knocking on famine's door. What? He called what we're facing a perfect storm of a perfect storm. And he's not alone in that view. A Barron's report says a food shortage could be coming even in the US. Farmers see it too. John Boyd Jr. is a fourth-generation farmer. He recently said we're going to see empty food shelves in the coming months. That's why getting survival food is more important than ever. Create your own stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food kits. It's not ordinary food. We're talking good for 25 years, super survival food. Hand-packed in a family-owned facility in the USA and giving jobs to over 200 Americans. They have different delicious breakfasts, lunches, dinners, and you can make these meals in just less than 20 minutes. You just add boiling water, simmer, and then you serve. And right now, for the next few days, viewers will get 10% off their first order by visiting 4, the numeral 4, patriots.com, and you use code MK to get the discount. Go to 4patriots.com. Use the code MK to start your own stockpile today. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.